Trial Lawyers University, where the Titans come to train. Produced and powered by LawPods.
Today we got Stephen Burg with us, all the way from the mile-high city of Denver, Colorado. Steve, is spring coming in Colorado? Because I really like Denver a lot. It's one of my more favorite cities.
Yeah, the weather's been typical spring weather here. Rain one day, beautiful the next day. It's been great.
Do you know that Denver has a special place in my heart because it was back in 2013, there was a reunion of the Trial Lawyers College there. And I was so fed up with the Trial Lawyers College at that point. I was like, this is all bullshit. So I'm like, instead of going, but a lot of my friends were going to it. And I was going to actually go to it too. And I'm like, but before we go, we should have a meetup in Denver because I got this idea for a new training program and called Trojan Horse Method. And about 10 people met up, about a dozen of us met, maybe 10 or 12 met up beforehand. And that was the beginning of it all. And just thought I'd bring it to your attention in Denver, Colorado. So it has a special place. And my sister lives there. So two special places. And my buddy Kurt Zahner's there too. So 3 special places. And so I'm getting to know more people in Denver. Anyways, Stephen Burg, you're pretty young and you got pretty great amount of success. How old are you?
44.
44. And when did you first, because your dad's Mike Burg is a pretty well-known, successful lawyer in your community. So, but when did you first get the idea that you wanted to be a lawyer?
I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I went to Columbine High School. I was there in 1999 when the school shooting happened. And for me, that was kind of a pivotal moment in my life where I decided I either wanted to put bad people away or help people that have gone through traumas.
Good thing you went for the second one, because we wouldn't be talking if you were a prosecutor. No offense to prosecutors. So you were in Columbine in 1999 for the first real mass school shooting in the country.
Yeah.
What was that? I can't imagine what it was like. So what was that like?
Yeah, for me, I guess I was fortunate. I was in the weight room, and it was on a day we were all supposed to max. We were supposed to test our max lift, and I was ready to go. And I remember, one of the custodian staff ran in, talked to our weights coach, who was a former Green Beret. And I kind of remember the looks on their face, but the music's really loud and, it's a typical weight room. So you can't really hear what's going on or anything. I just remember them kind of running out. And then shortly after, the fire alarm goes off. And so kids start making their way directly from the weight room to outside. And so I asked a couple of my buddies, I said, hey, I'm ready to go. We'll do the fire drill in a second. Can you spot me? I'm halfway doing my lift and we could feel one of the bombs go off and shake the school. And so at that point, then we got outside and it was just kind of chaos.
Yeah, we all seen the pictures from back then. The
Yeah.
chaos. So you survived Columbine, and then where do you end up going to college and law school?
I was already admitted to University of Wyoming. I was going up there to play football. After Columbine, we didn't really have our books and didn't have a lot of the materials. And so we were doing half days at another high school, Chatfield, but we weren't really doing anything. So I talked to one of my teachers and just said, hey, look, like, I don't think it makes sense to keep coming to class and just hear kids cry. And that just wasn't a good healing process for me. So I stopped showing up, and my grades I got penalized for that, and wasn't NCAA eligible to play football my freshman year. So, I probably should have appealed it and fought it. I just didn't really have kind of the energy at the time. And then at University of Wyoming, they had me be like I think they called it a gray shirt. I took 11 and a half credits because 12 credits was full time. So I didn't start losing any eligibility, and trained and just kind of was getting ready for football. And the rugby team, a couple guys came up. I had played rugby in high school as well. I talked to the football coach about playing rugby. He said, play it like an outside linebacker and go have a good time. And We ended up going to Division I national championship. I was one of the few guys that was a freshman and got a lot of playing time, and it was a great experience.
Yeah, my buddy Vince Colella is a big rugby guy. It seems like those rugby guys are super tight knit, like homeboys. Like even after you retire, you're still buddies with them for like life.
Oh
That's
yeah.
what it seems like for him. How did your rugby career come to an end?
Well, so I loved rugby because I played defense my whole life. And I finally got a chance to run with the ball. Loved it. I ended up playing my entire time at University of Wyoming. We had 15 All-Americans while I played, and it was a really good time. Graduated Wyoming. There's a number of us who had made the All-American team that there were certain guys trying to figure out if they were going to go play overseas and what they were going to do. I wanted to go to law school, and so went that route. And we were playing in a was playing an alumni game against Aspen's men's club, and I guess guys started getting into it. And then one of the bigger props laid a haymaker on me, knocked me out, and that was kind of the end of my rugby career. I had about 2.5 years of cognitive therapy, kind of dealing with the brain injury from that.
Wow. So empathize what a lot of your clients are going through, huh? From that and what it's like to have to, when you say cognitive therapy, what did you have to relearn to do?
Yeah, I mean, basic things. I had a really bad stutter, and I would forget what I was going to say. I had short-term, long-term issues of remembering. I had difficulty controlling my emotions. I would have like adrenaline. I would get random adrenaline kicks. Simple things like driving. I would get in the car and I could be gone for 3 or 4 hours, not knowing where I was going or what I was doing.
But before you got blindsided, you were a pretty frequent fighter in the rugby game, weren't you? I mean, fighting was your game.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had a number of scraps, and I like to compete, and I kind of had little brother syndrome. So my older brother is much bigger than me, 6'3.5", 300 pounds. He played football at CU, and so I was always the scrappy younger brother.
Tell me, like you were like the Bob Probert of your, from the Bruise Brothers back in Detroit. Probably don't remember that, but him and Kosher used to fight everybody all the time. But you're about his size, so it was like people were getting argument, getting out of line. They'd send you in to kick their ass. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I mean, I did my fair share of fighting and finishing fights.
Because you didn't learn to fight playing rugby, didn't you? Learn to fight like your whole life growing up. I mean, wasn't that part of like your upbringing there in Denver?
Yeah, I mean, I was rambunctious and I had a lot of energy and didn't necessarily like to.
Follow
Uh,
follow authority, listen to what people said told you to do?
yeah, right. I mean, I had a rebellious side. I think, like most kids, I had a little more energy and a little more a bigger chip on my shoulder, probably.
All right. Well, you finally get through college and now you're in law school. So where do you go to law school?
University of Denver. I did the night program and I worked during the day. Worked at the firm here.
Wow. I did the night program in Detroit College of Law, but I just worked as a house painter. So I didn't get a whole lot of experience in the law field because my dad was a lawyer too, but he wasn't that easy to work for. And it wasn't like your dad, I think, was probably a little bit better mentor because you spent, from the time even through law school and even after law school, you've only had one career, right? One position, one job, and that's with Berg Simpson.
Yeah.
Your dad did send you off to go work for somebody else for a while to see what it was like not to, be a name brand, experience
Yeah.
nepotism.
I mean, before I got into the law, I went and worked for a commercial real estate company for a summer. The next year, he had me. One of our clients was a car dealer, and so my job was to go sell cars in kind of a shady part of town, so to speak. And I learned to deal with everything at that point in time.
Well, how do you think, you know, like you're only 44 and I know you've had like, because we've talked about a lot of your results and stuff, and you've had some real great results in the trial. And how many cases think you tried, Steve?
I think I first chaired only like 13 or 14.
And what would you say are like some of your more memorable verdicts, the ones that stick out in your mind that you're like stoked about? Or like somebody says, "Hey, Berg, tell me about your verdicts." You'd be like, "Let me tell you about this trial." That's why I got an easy job. It's easy for me to talk to lawyers. Like, tell me about your best verdicts. It's like Nah, I don't like to talk about myself. No, that never happened. So, like, what are your best verdicts? The ones you're most proud of?
You know, I think I'm proud of all the verdicts and all the results that we can get for the clients. There's a few that kind of stick out.
Yeah, those are the ones I'm
Yeah,
talking about,
and
okay? Not
and so
not the politically correct. I'm happy of all. It's every just there's some that stick out. Let's go. Which are the ones that stick out?
yeah, so I took over a case. Another lawyer quit on this client. He didn't speak English. It was a really difficult case. There was no visible damage. Basically, the carrier and the defense lawyer were like, nobody's going to like this guy. They offered, $7,000. So the case was basically my client gets hit from behind from a truck, and there's really no damage to his vehicle. He had a prior workers' comp injury in the same area. He then hits a deer about a year later, totals his truck, and then he starts to have treatment after that and ends up having, a low back injury. And so everybody was saying, you know, it's the unwinnable case. He was a pot farmer in Colorado,
Before it was cool.
but before it was acceptable, let's say that.
Right.
And
Poor people are
so
making $10 million a year being pot farmers with, small farms. But go on.
yeah, so the lawyer on this case was he's actually a decent guy now, and I've gotten to know him a little bit, but at the time he was just saying nobody's gonna, find value in this human and your case isn't worth anything. In fact, during jury selection, there was a lot of people that exposed just vitriol hate for my client because he had been in the country for 18 years and didn't speak English. And so I got it all out though. I got all the poison out and was able to identify the jurors. But the defense lawyer, he called his boss after the jury selection and said, this is the best defense panel I've seen in my 16-year career. And so I turned to him at that point and I just said, what are you doing? You do understand if you lose this case, you're going to be the worst lawyer in the last 16 years. So I started kind of each day taunting him a little bit, saying, what do you think? You're up 7 points. Are you going to play prevent today? And this guy was a nervous wreck by the end. We end up, we hit the case for like $185,000. And unfortunately, the lawyer got fired over the case. But it was one of those cases where,
Wait,
you know,
why is that unfortunate? I
well,
mean, if you fuck up that badly, you should deserve to. I mean, deserve to get fired, don't you? I mean, you got the best defense. You got a newer lawyer. You got no property damage. You got all these things. You should get fired if you lose that case.
yeah, I mean, he was a nicer guy. Like some of the defense lawyers that I've seen, including this last week, just the dirty tricks and all the stuff they try to pull and the misrepresentations, and so yeah. But ultimately, he got terminated on the case, and he gave me some nice props afterwards and all of that. So it felt really good. The client was really happy, and it was a good win.
I bet it was. It sounds like a great win, and that's the kind of win that people that are young they need to experience those kind of wins to get their confidence going.
Yeah.
Because like, oh man, I've had like this week was or last yeah this week has been a great week because I was in trial with Dale Gallipo up in Riverside on a excessive force case for 3 days, and so just who Dale is?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's teaching a 1 day civil rights master class that he's taught several times every summer at TLU. But the guy is such a it's amazing to watch these different lawyers and just watch this guy's how he with the cops and the challenges and watching people at the top of the game like analyzing what they're doing. Because then I was in trial yesterday with Panish, and that was a different experience, right? Because that was
Yeah.
and that's a tough case he's got tough case because he's got to prove vicarious liability or direct negligence against this construction company when it's they're one of their laborers is driving to work in the morning, and it's generally not in the course and scope, but we'll see. He's like,
Wow.
he's like Ambrose. They don't always pay. Sometimes we got to go to trial. I was like, I understand that's most people's lives, Brian, but not Brian's. They usually pay him, but we'll see. So it's It's pretty fun being in trial with these great, lawyers and being there in the back room was in there, and like Galipo, every time there's a break, he'd take, like his associates and the co-counsel, we all go into like the conference room and kind of discuss what's going on, get your take, what do you think, how's this going? So, what he's trying to do is actually like really good mentoring, for everybody that was there. So
Yeah.
it's kind of cool getting back in the game here. So let's see, you only spoke at one time before at TLU, isn't that right? In New York City?
Yeah. TLU, New York City.
Yeah, you've been kind of derelict in your, participation till you're lucky. I don't hold grudges though. So, because like, where did we first meet? Was it like in the weight room at the Lowe's? Is that where we first
Yeah.
met?
Yep.
That was a few years ago. I don't know
Yeah.
how did we connect?
I think I came up and talked to you about the great job you've been doing with Trial Lawyers University through COVID, and how you really put on these programs, and how great they've been for lawyers to learn, including myself, to be able to see these fantastic lawyers. And then of course, TLU on demand. I subscribe to that, and there's so much fantastic content, and to be able to just see so many different perspectives, it's a fantastic way to learn.
Now I remember why I immediately liked you. I was like, why did I like this guy? Why did I do this? That's why. But yeah, so yeah, you've never been to our beach conference. I'm right here now. Just have to kind of see out the window here.
Oh
So
wow.
I'm at the Paseo right now in Huntington Beach because I got, things to do here, plus a little socializing here, mixing with the local attorneys. There's a little mixer happy hour last night. It was great. See a bunch of people, meet a bunch of new people. But I'm so stoked for this conference. I can't even tell you because like it is going to be, you don't know it, but it is like the greatest conference because this hotel is so nice. We bought the whole hotel, which makes it special. And we got the greatest trial lawyers coming. We got 4 lecture tracks, 8 workshop tracks. We do a full breakfast, full lunch, theme parties. We're gonna have a live voir dire track, which could be super cool. So luckily, this is our 4th year in a row at the same hotel. And so I'm very grateful to you for giving us time to really get our act together and get our, processes fine-tuned before the Bergs come. Because not just you coming, but who else is coming from your firm?
Yeah, Mike, my dad, and then Jessica Brewer, Jake Berg, and we're still working on a couple others. So yeah, we're gonna have a
Jake
good
Berg.
time. My
Is that
cousin.
your a cousin? Wow. It's like a
Yep.
family event over there at the Berg Simpson. Family event. So what are you gonna be teaching here in Huntington Beach?
I'm gonna be focused in on case framing, but really what we've coined as first to frame, and the importance of trying to get out in front of the defense to frame your issues, whether it's good or bad. And the science about first impressions are lasting, they're sticky, and the quicker you can get the first impression on a topic, good or bad, the harder it is for the defense to move it later on. And so, using those principles, we're going to be talking about a number of cases where we've done that and how we did it, and the results that followed. And
Who's
then
we?
working. So Mike and I are going to be talking. Are going to do the lecture, and then I'm going to do the workshop, and then really work on, other people's cases, and help them with the first to frame method, and getting things framed up early, and plan strategizing when to do it.
So give us an example of what the application of that is in a recent case, so we can get a better
Yeah,
understanding.
recent case. I would say I had a case where my client had significant drug use, and actually halfway through essentially his recovery, he had a drug overdose, and he ended up having his heart stopped. He had a anoxic brain injury, and was back in a wheelchair for about a year and a half. And so wanted to get that out in jury selection. And the first thing I start talking about is, does anyone here have any loved ones that have dealt with addiction issues? And we started, just talking about it, brutal honesty, and then started transitioning to the drug use that my client had, including cocaine and LSD, magic mushrooms, marijuana. And, we went through and started talking about, does that make that person any less valuable? How do you feel about that? How do you feel about the potential to award a verdict of millions of dollars to somebody that you know has had addiction issues in the past and has had a drug overdose. And just getting out in front of these issues and trying to get people to talk about it, and ultimately that case, the defense tried that case that this guy's a drug addict. How much does he value his own health? How much is it from the car crash versus the overdose? And we ended up having an $18.1 million verdict on that. And there were jurors afterwards that they talked about how they kind of knew the important issues by by the time I was done with jury selection. It's about also taking the sting out of what the defense is going to bring up.
The highlight of TLU for me was having the opportunity to network with attorneys from out of state.
TLU has been amazing. I'm so glad I came. It was one of the most inspiring events I've been to. Great networking, great food. It's been amazing. I can't wait for next year.
You not just had this traumatic brain injury, getting cold cocked and having to do cognitive therapy, but I remember a couple years ago we were about to do one of my boot camps and we were getting all trained up, and then you had another setback, from skiing. What happened to you there?
I, there's two versions of that event. The story I want to tell, which is we were heli skiing and we had nowhere to land. We jumped out of the helicopter. I hit 100-foot cliff and caught an edge. The real version on that is I was skiing with my brother and my 5-year-old niece on a run called Rainbow in Steamboat. It was kind of whiteout conditions. I hit a bump, I went up, and my femur went right through my tibia and just shattered my lower leg. I assumed I assumed I was fine. I was kind of like, maybe I'm just old and being a baby about it. Tried to pick my leg up, and it felt like it was moving in pieces. And then I had to use the toboggan all the way down. Ski patrol got me, and then they said, if your leg goes numb, you got to let us know. 4 minutes, 5 minutes later, leg goes numb. So they get an ambulance there, ski me right into the back of the ambulance. I'm still like, the paramedics are like, how bad are you hurt? Like, should we get the pain meds going? I'm like, no, I got my kids. Don't give me any pain meds right now. Like, my kids were on the mountain in a lesson. It was a guy's weekend. And of course my wife's like, don't do anything crazy. Don't have anything happen. And so I was like, "Oh man, don't call her yet. I think I'll be okay." They get me on the ambulance bed and they asked my brother. They were like, "Is he okay?" Because they kept asking me, and I'm like, I don't know. I could be a baby. I'm not sure. And so finally, my brother's like, just take him to the hospital. Like, if he's unsure about, get him there. They get me there, and we're trying to transfer from the ambulance bed to the hospital bed, and I still got my ski boots on and my equipment. I asked one of the guys that was working there. I was like, "Hey, can you hold my heel because I think my legs might be in pieces." Yeah, 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 yeah. And so they start sliding me over. 1, 2, 3, we move, and my foot was up like this, and he moved his hand, and it went pop, 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 and then my leg started dangling, facing behind me. And at that point, I needed some pain meds, and I knew I was going to have surgery. They're like, "We need a doctor to put this back in the right place." And I start just yelling at everybody. I was like, "You get me some pain meds. Like, grab my leg before it tears off here." So they like turned it around and put it facing up. And then they had to pull my ski boot off after that. And I'm like, "You have to have a saw. There has to be another way." And they're like, "There's no other way." And so they held my hip down and then grabbed my ski boot, and they tried like one time, and you can feel the bones like come
Oh,
apart like that. Finally, I'm like, just get it done. Like, I don't care. And they were able to get it off. So I ended up I had an X fix put on it, an external fixation. There was too much swelling, and they were worried about compartmental syndrome. And so they just pinned a number of the bones and had the the frame on it, and then I had to wait like 11 or 12 days for the swelling to go down. And they had to basically take cement and cadaver bone and everything else. And I got 16 screws and a plate in my leg. My surgeon was fantastic. You know, I know a couple other people that had the same surgery in a similar time frame, and they both lost their legs since then.
They're
So I'm really,
amputees?
yeah,
Wow.
yep,
Pretty lucky, huh?
yes.
I mean,
So I feel really fortunate.
right. I mean, because like I can only imagine. How do you think like those two experiences between your leg and your TBI have kind of informed you on, your personal injury practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have a pretty good idea, at least of what I went through. That I'm sure others have had similar experiences, and I think it just helps me be a better advocate and explain. I mean, sometimes as lawyers, we don't do a great job of explaining like what does this look like in life, right? And so I think there's times where that gives me an advantage of, for me the leg. One of the big things of the leg was like it was my right leg, and it was so mangled that I mean, I was stuck. Like I couldn't really do hardly anything, and it swelled all the way up to the hip, and so it was a problem. Just crutches weren't really a good use, and I was in a wheelchair for about 3.5 months trying to figure out, like, the simple things of how do I get to the office? Like I can't drive. So I took a lot of Ubers and figured out
Nice.
how to make it work. And, like if my wife was around, she would drive me. But a lot of the times I just wanted the freedom. Like I wanted to get out of the house. I wanted to try to just get back to normalcy. And just like for me, getting back to the office was just so therapeutic. It was fantastic. Like I finally got some of my schedule back, and I loved it. And but that's like one of the things, the loss of freedom, right? Like by somebody else's choices, that is a huge impact on people's lives that sometimes we don't think about, or sometimes people don't advocate as lawyers about. But that's a huge loss for people.
The inconvenience factor, you know,
Yeah.
that I would say that's a big inconvenience factor. So you recently just got out of trial last week because, we've been planning on putting this together for a while. And so what was that? But fortunately, it was a great result. So what was that trial about?
Yeah, it was a fun trial. It was a case where this intersection had a railroad overpass, probably about 100 feet next to one of the direction of travel. And so it had a second set of lights. So it had the regular intersection lights, the four lights, and then the overpass is here, and then there's another set of lights like right there. And so the defense was basically this was a confusing intersection. The defendant was 19 years old. He's driving, he's got his new baby in the car, he's got his fiance in the car, and ultimately he runs this red light. And so the defense had taken the position it's a dangerous intersection. His actions were reasonable under the circumstances because it's such a bad intersection. There's a news article on how many crashes have been there. I mean, the whole thing. And so he hits our client and going about 60 miles per hour. Our client's vehicle is hit 125 feet. She's going north. It's hit 125 feet to the east, and it ends up on its hood. She ends up fracturing her clavicle. A number of the ribs are fractured. Her spleen is shattered. Her diaphragm was ripped open, and her stomach was shot up through her diaphragm. They had to do emergency surgery on her to repair the diaphragm, to fix the ribs, and then ultimately the heart sits on top of the diaphragm like this. And when the diaphragm tore, the covering of the heart is the pericardium, and so it tore the cover of the heart. And so they had to do a mesh repair of the pericardium to put it back together. So the pericardium over the heart basically keeps the heart lubricated. It's got a little bit of fluid in there, and it keeps it so there's not as much friction on it. So the pericardium is really important for the heart to function normal. And so she had to have a mesh on that. The defense in this case was basically they're not responsible because he was a 19-year-old and it was a confusing situation. And then ultimately they blamed the plaintiff that she knew this intersection. She was more familiar with this intersection. She knew it was dangerous, and she failed to look both ways before going through the green light, which is crazy.
Did you get any comparative fault on your client for not looking both ways before they went to the green light?
Yeah, I mean, the jury found 5% of comparative fault against our client for failing to look both ways.
Well, and
Uh,
so what was the verdict?
so the verdict was 5.3 million. And so in Colorado, the non-economics are capped. And for this case, it was under the old cap. So it was basically, call it $500,000 is the regular cap. And then they can make it into a million or a little over a million by clear and convincing evidence if your judge wants to do that. I had a battle with this judge. He didn't want me to show really any demonstrative exhibits, and he would say they were 403 unfairly prejudicial to the defense. And so a lot of our stuff was not allowed in. I wasn't really counting on him applying the higher cap. So we really pushed for physical impairment. So in Colorado, instead of just having your economic losses, your non-economic losses, we have 3 categories of damages: your economic losses, your non-economic losses, and then physical impairment and disfigurement. And so the push in this case was to push as much into physical impairment. We ended up getting like 3.6 in physical impairment, a small number in non-economic, and then a bigger number in the economic losses. So,
So pretty happy overall?
oh yeah, significantly more than the defense ever thought we would get. Significantly more than certainly any contemplation by the defense of offering. So,
So what were some of the key issues in jury selection because like in jury selection there, did the judge, how long did the judge give you? 15 minutes, 30 minutes?
so it's a lot of times it's 20 minutes here, but I end up getting 45 minutes.
In that kind of condensed time frame, 45 minutes to talk to how many people?
18.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Yeah.
Like, where I was just with Pandish, the judge gave him an hour to talk to 50 people. I mean, it's like, and I was with Gallipo, and he got 15 minutes to talk to, 14 people. So you got one question per person. Let me tell you, Mr. Burg, what concerns me about you is you have 10 police officers in your family. I
Right.
think that's going to sway, you know what I mean? So it was like, but for me, it was real informative to see what you got to do. And you know what I mean? You got these circumstances you just got to fucking deal with. So with
Yeah.
these judges. So what did you, with this narrow time frame, what are the things that you hit on with a case like that?
Yeah. And on this case, I worked with Harry Plotkin.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was he out there for jury selection with you?
He was. Yeah.
Wow. Harry doesn't like to travel too much, so I'm surprised. He must really like you to come out there to Denver, but it's not too far. But he's quite the insightful fella,
Yeah.
to say the
He's
least.
fantastic. And so he had me doing some things that I have some similar things that I have traditionally done, but he kind of reframed some of them, and I thought it was really helpful. So a couple of them, we started off talking about, like, we all know we should be defensive drivers, right? But do we really do that every single time? Like every single time? For instance, if we come up to a light and the light turns green, do we really look both ways before we start to drive every single time? Is that how we really do it? And just trying to get people to talk about how do they feel about that, and try to identify the jurors that are going to blame the plaintiff. And then so we started talking about, running stale yellow lights. How do you feel about that? To identify people because a lot of people aren't going to necessarily talk about, oh, well, I run red lights, right? And so most of the time we're looking at, okay, what about stale yellow lights?
What's a scale yellow light?
A stale yellow, a light that's been yellow for a while, right? Like, it's one thing to go through the intersection if the light is just changing. It's another thing, like, the light changes and then you're driving up and you go through the intersection.
Oh, where you actually have this. You could stop if you wanted to.
Yeah.
You just look at it, you're like,
Yeah.
You look a little around, you're like, step on the gas.
Let's
I got
go.
places to go.
Yeah.
I do that on a regular basis, but I always look around for cops too because I'm like, that's got to be illegal. But anyways, we're in a hurry. Got to watch out. So
Yeah. So trying to figure out who those people are and identify them early. And then the second thing that I started talking about was really how I wasn't suing a company like Amazon or Walmart. I'm suing a young man. And, how do you feel about that? You're not going to hear any evidence in this case of who actually might pay or whether any amount is to be paid. And you're not going to hear any evidence that this will have any effect on the defendant one way or another. How do you feel about that? Are you going to be able to trust the process? And then I do this thing about, I typically call that like outside the box, like things you don't consider outside the jury box.
we're only allowed to consider things that are inside the box,
Exactly.
like
So
the
I go,
law, the evidence,
yep,
the testimony,
yep,
and
and
everything else is outside the box, like
correct.
sympathy, who will pay the verdict, how I'll get paid, if I'll ever get paid.
And then I usually will mention, you know, you enter what's called a verdict. And after you enter your verdict, it goes to the judge and the judge enters a judgment and the judge considers other things. Does everybody feel like they're going to be able to trust this process? Or who here, when you go back to that deliberation room, even despite your best efforts, are going to be unable to shake the thoughts of how this might affect the defendant? So, talking about that. And then I usually do something about millions of dollars. If the evidence and the law justify a verdict of millions of dollars here. And here I'm talking about impairment because I'm trying to frame everything around physical impairment. So if you're to hear testimony and you're moved by the evidence that this is a permanent and lifelong injury that's going to have physical impairments, will everybody keep an open mind that that evidence could be in the value of many of millions of dollars? Those were kind of the things I like to do. On this one, I typically, before I get into the talk on damages, I like to pre-frame the issue of damages in the sense that I will typically use this question, Dan, separating our faith and our family. Let's put that aside for a second. We're not talking about our faith and our family, but is our health the most valuable asset that we have? And so I started a discussion on our health and what the value of that to us is, and if that's taken by the negligence of another. But in this case, I started talking about the damages before I pre-framed that, and I got a lot of negative feedback from the jurors about an amount of damages and all of that. So it was a good reminder that I need to do that first every time. I tried to come back to it, but it was harder to do after there'd been discussions of the amounts. So it was a good reminder of first to frame and trying to get that stuff up front.
So you should have done what differently?
So I should have, before I started talking of any of the damages, I should have talked about putting faith and family aside is the most valuable asset we have, our health. And I should have started that conversation before transitioning to millions of dollars. And in this case, one of the jurors wanted to talk about it, and I kind of just went with it. And then it started to snowball of people saying that's a lot of money. That could be greedy. That could be, and they started doing all these things. And then I tried to stop it and say, well, okay, let's consider something for a second. And then talked about that faith and family question. So I did it later in the process than I normally would because I just kind of went with a natural conversation with one of the jurors.
Right.
And
That's where you might say next time, excuse me, Mr. Berg, that's a great point you brought up. And that's something I'm going to talk about in just a little bit
yeah,
after we, and so when we do, is it okay if I come back to you and lead off the conversation with you? And they're like, sure. But that way,
Yeah.
because sometimes, you got to, because I really think it's important to like fully explore an issue before you move to the next one. So
right.
everybody's on the same page. Because if you just follow those threads of jurors, they can, take you down some rabbit holes and you're like, running out of time. And then
Yeah.
all these other things, you're like, fuck, you don't want to be rude to people, but, you got to have little built-in devices to prevent these threads. What were some of like, looking back on that trial, what were some of the highlights? Some things that you were really like, that was a fucking cool moment.
I mean, the defense came up with like a new theory that there was a phantom vehicle, and I mean, it was ridiculous. It was very helpful to us. Like, so there's a jury instruction in Colorado that says you can violate a statute if compliance with the statute would have put you in danger. And so their new theory was there was a or a truck that was tailgating him so close that he couldn't hit the brakes at the intersection. And so it was safer to run it. So I crossed the defendant on this and just had a field day. He was not well prepped. It was like, okay, so this phantom vehicle, we never heard about that in the police report. We never, even when you got out of the hospital and you talked to the officer, you never mentioned anything of a phantom vehicle. True, true. Okay, when this case got filed and you got this fantastic lawyer over there, he's one of the best lawyers in the state, and he didn't advise you to go make a complete record with the police about this phantom vehicle. No. Okay. And then discovery, you don't say anything in discovery. Okay, in deposition, you don't say anything. And then I was like, okay, let's talk about the phantom vehicle. And I'm asking him questions. What color is this phantom vehicle? He can't tell me. What, is it a man or a woman driving? I didn't see it. I just saw the grill of the truck. Okay, you saw the grill of the truck. What type of truck? Is it a Chevy? Is it a Ford? Is it, all these, a Dodge? And no answers. And then he says, well, I could only see in the rear view. I'm like, you have 3 rear view mirrors. You look left, you look up in the center, you look over here. You tell me you didn't see who the person was, huh? This alleged phantom vehicle. So we had a good time with that.
It does sound like fun. Those are like that's why I'm like going to these courtrooms, like just remembering, like, because like I'm not doing my fall conference this year, so we're not doing Vegas because I need to take all my time and bandwidth to become Dan Ambrose, the trial lawyer, in 2025. So
Nice.
so that's why I like to get fired up about these things. You know what I mean? You see people and, the things we're doing. It's like, of course, as I watch, Dalipo and Panish in court, I'm seeing myself up there. And of course, whatever they're doing, I know I could do better, of course. Like every trial lawyer, you watch somebody do something like, fuck, if I was up there doing that, this is what I would do. And it'd be better. Let's hope that, right? I think we all do that.
And so you have to practice in the deposition. You practice in motion hearings. You practice at the grocery store. That's why you have a family. You practice on them. You have to keep the skill up or it erodes. It's simple as that.
Somebody give us an overview of this case.
Or I call wowing it. And what I mean by wisdom of the wise is, why are we still right in spite of this fact?
These are just some of the clips when I was cross-examined 10 years ago, remember that.
About 11 o'clock at night, and he leaves this message. I got a brilliant idea. Every conversation he starts, I have a brilliant idea.
But welcome, everybody. We've got a good crowd here today.
So, Mr. Burg, if people need to get a hold of Stephen Burg before they get to meet you in person at TLU Huntington Beach, which I'm like, just telling you, it's going to be so great. How do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can give me a call. You can give me a call at the office, like email as well. sberg@bergsimpson.com. You can call our office, probably the easiest way, 303-792-5595. To get a hold of me if there's any questions. And I'm always happy to help. I've had people reach out after I've given presentations and work with them about their next upcoming trial. And, I think
hope so, buddy. This is TLU.
Yeah.
This is community
Yeah.
support. You better be helping people. Everybody tells me, hey, I called that Burg guy. He don't call me back. I'm like, Burg's done at TLU. Try to give him one more chance here after TLU NYC. And now that's just too much. That's too much, Burg. All right. So Steve almost did my boot camp. That was a couple years ago when it was more in its infancy stages before it become what it is today. and because he broke his leg
I
and
did
used
part of
that
it
as his.
though. I did
He did
I
a
did
little
a
bit of
number of
prep,
weeks leading up to it. It was very
a
helpful.
little
I liked
bit,
it.
but what the stuff we have now is because we're doing at TLU you can do like there's 3 presentation skills boot camps, but they're limited to 5 people each. So not everybody's gonna get to do them, but it's so cool now because we do this trucking case, the opening statement for a real trucking case, and there's actually an in-cab video, so you could see the entire, you can actually see the motorcycle flight in the side window before it smashes into the side of the truck. You can hear clunk. So
Wow.
it's like you actually watching, you actually, you see a person die. It's quite tragic,
Ugh.
obviously, but this is but I'm saying, but having a video of the crash and pictures of the scene makes it so much easier to retell the story because then people could picture it and imagine it. And, everybody's got these vehicular crashes, whether it's trucks, cars, motorcycles. So also using a map of the area. So it really it's much more practical, than the other story we used to use for the teaching, which was the tanning salon story, was this
Right.
criminal case I did like 15 years ago. And this is actually an upcoming trial. And actually, Joe Freed is actually going to do a voir dire on this actual case, because of course the victim has something, drugs in their, marijuana or something like that. I
Right.
don't know, but it's going to be so cool though to see like the actual voir dire in a trucking case with a focus jury with somebody like Joe's skill set, on this kind of case. Just saying, what I'm saying is we got it really tuned in now, and we're doing these boot camps like with Joe Freed, August 13th through 16th on, trucking. So he's basically your co-counsel on your trucking case and how he would work it up if he was actually doing the case. And then, myself and my other coaches like Giorgio are going to teach the performance aspects of it, right? So how to
Right.
like tell that your actual trucking stories and, with, creating space to make, practice the eye contact, the hand movement, the emotional state control, all the things that people mostly never think about. And, but when you practice in the context of an opening, then you develop these transferable skills to use on your own cases to make them come to life is the idea, right? To transport the jury, to make them witnesses to these events so they experience them emotionally and not just have to like listen to boring narratives of them. So
Right.
that's what we got going on because I just did one with Satch Oliver, a couple of months ago and John Romano, and I got all these great ones coming up with like Kimball Jones on insurance bad faith. That guy's been killing it in Vegas. He's got 3 9-figure verdicts. John Romano on spine cases. Your friend, local Denver guy, Kurt Zahner on premises cases. So Dale Gallipo on civil rights. So all these different boot camps coming up,
It's
fired up
exciting.
about them. Yes, Dave Clark, Dark Arts. We're doing a Dark Arts program before Huntington Beach. But one of the things that we developed since you were here is this cross-examination of the defense medical expert, which is, I always end every program with it because I think repetition is the key to all learning. And, let me ask you, cross-examination, how often do you use flip charts on the cross of your defense experts or lay witnesses?
Not often. I'm
Right. But like, you're going to change that because the
okay.
truth is the flip chart is one of the most powerful tools in cross-examination because it slows things down. It makes you the teacher, like your bullet points. You can, but people never use flip charts unless they practice using them
Right.
because they get self-conscious about their writing, the flow of it. And it's awkward because it's something different. And where do you position it, all this stuff. But once you practice, because like my buddy, Orlando de Castroverde just got like a $1.7 million verdict about a month ago on a non-surgical spine case. It was one of his best verdicts ever. And, afterwards, because we did some work on his case, but afterwards he was like, Dan, it's the first time I ever used a flip chart. And it was so great. It just changed everything. It's just like, the guy couldn't escape from what I was writing on that board. And it was so easy for people to remember. And so we teach that, in the cross-examination part of this program. So
Nice.
this is your cross-examination class right now because it's about 5 minutes. You're going to be the defense expert. And so the skills that we're going to focus on are the obvious ones: leading questions only, 1 new fact per question. People are like, well, I think open-ended questions are good once in a while. Well, they are good once in a while, but the rule is leading questions. The exception is the open-ended
Right.
with no bad answer that you've thought of that you want to, get the person to lie about so you can impeach them with your, previous transcript. But 1 new fact per question, leading questions only, cross-examining in the present tense, which most
Mhm.
people can't do. Because if you can do that, it forces you to imagine what you're talking about, forces the witness and allows the jury to actually picture it. Looping, establish a fact, repeat that fact in the next statement. Dale Gallipo was doing a great job of that. He would always repeat what the person just said in the next sentence, and so it was really good because obviously you're teaching the jury.
Yeah.
Dropping all the taglines like right, correct, isn't it true, true. Most lawyers have tough time dropping those. Dropping all the filler words like and, so, okay. People do that whole career until they force themselves not to. Effectively using a flip chart, that means writing legibly. That means putting only one topic per page. That means, when you look at it, the jury looks at it, really effective using glance control. Being intentional with our emotional states, because really two emotional states dominate cross. What do you think those are, Stephen Burg? Two dominant emotional states of cross-examination.
Yeah.
And they're not anger and frustration, just to clue you in.
Yeah, no, I would say, or no, I mean, I always try to just be matter of fact on the cross and slow down the testimony.
Slow. That's another skill. Speaking more slowly.
Yeah.
Because most people speed up. If you go on CBN and you watch somebody's direct versus their cross, almost everybody, their cross is much faster tempoed. And people tend to get a little bit of an aggressiveness in their tone in cross. It's just the weirdest thing, even in practice. So the two dominant emotions are curiosity, like, inquisitive, like, doctor, you're a board certified medical expert. So, eyebrows raised, right and flex at the end. That's curiosity. Or disappointment when you impeach them, when they say things that are clearly not true, when they're obviously lying. So sad that you've sold your soul to the devil. So those are the key dominant emotions. They're probably 99% of the time.
Yeah.
Bringing the jury in. So some people are comfortable asking their questions to the jury. I'm not. I think that, when you turn and ask a question to the jury, it should be something that really stands out. Like,
really important.
This is big, people. Don't forget about this point, right? I'd say that's it. And so to train this, though, because it trains tempo, like this one cross, the defense medical expert cross, is the right way versus the wrong way. It could be extrapolated to any type of expert, but it has to be practiced. It was great. I was doing my Monty Ties from Mississippi. He was just a guest last week, and I'm like, Monty, I'd ask him a question. He'd have all the answers. Like, I go, what are the two dominant emotions? Like curiosity and disappointment. I'm like, how do you know that, Monty? He goes, Dan, I've listened to your podcast. I've heard this cross 15 times. I'm like, oh, well, you could do it. He's like, not quite yet, but you still cross. I'll be the expert. So this is your first time here, isn't it, Burg?
Yeah, it is. And I've done the name cards under the IPVO where I'm writing stuff down and like getting them to agree to it in cross. I just haven't done the flip chart version of it.
Oh, this is going to be a game changer for you.
Yeah, I'm excited for it.
No, I don't have like a flip chart with me here, but I'll imagine I have a flip chart.
I'm going to see it in Huntington Beach, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, because it's there's a cross session every morning and every afternoon, all 4 days, because it's such an important skill and people don't practice it. They just don't. And, I read people's cross examinations or transcripts, and I'm like, who taught you how to cross? It's like, well, let me ask you this, though, before I show you my cross, because you've gotten quite a bit of success. So, like, who were your mentors other than your dad?
Yeah, I think everybody that I've worked with or been able to see, I mean, I think just like everybody, you try to figure out, steal from everybody. I think like a good trial lawyer, like you were talking about, you go see somebody in court like Panish, and you're up there saying, visualizing, I can do that, and figuring out how to incorporate that. I mean, I think that's the brilliance of what you've put together at Trial Lawyers University, is you've gotten so many people that, all the younger lawyers or new lawyers, or whether new or old, it doesn't matter. Like, go take tools that other lawyers are using to become successful. So, I mean, my dad is really good at themes and making cases simple, and like really getting a jury to understand, and he uses simple language. There's other lawyers here that Jim Heckbert, he was a Inner Circle of Advocates member, and he's so detail oriented and so thorough in his cross examinations and depositions, and I've tried to just take pieces of him and my dad and my uncle, and then I've watched, Panish, and I've watched Nick Rowley, and I've watched all these other lawyers do it, just trying to learn from everybody. And that's why Trial Lawyers on Demand, you can go on there and you can watch and see how these lawyers are doing it, and it's fantastic. And just take pieces from everybody and make sure that you're still able to be your authentic self.
Right. I think people, obviously it's all about authenticity, and people are like, oh, you just got to be yourself. I'm like, not if yourself is a nervous, insecure mess. Don't be that person. Nobody's going to follow you. Right.
Right.
And, but people can't be themselves if they're nervous and uptight. And the only way they're not going to be nervous and uptight is if they train, if they practice, if they build their confidence. And confidence comes from knowing your shit inside and out and winning. And the more you win, the more confident you get. That's why like losses are so devastating, because it's like, that's why you got to recover too, because it really punches that ego right in the fucking mouth. And it happens a few times in a row. People just, they start selling everything. They just, feel rejected. They quit. But okay, cross-examination. Ready?
Okay.
Doctor, you're a board certified medical expert.
Correct.
To become board certified, this requires advanced education.
Yes.
This education, it takes place after medical school.
Yes.
But while you were in medical school, you did take classes.
Correct.
One of the classes that you took was on how to conduct a proper medical evaluation.
In the clinical setting, yes.
Okay, so we learned this in segments. That's segment 1. So we're learning pacing. We're learning looping. Each sentence begins with the last sentence ended. And as you can see my voice, I'm curious. My eyebrows raise at the end of every statement, and as I give it to you. So now we go into the next part. Now we're going to start using our flip chart. You're trained that a proper medical evaluation, it must be impartial.
Correct.
Oh, another thing I'll point out too is it's so important to breathe on cross, because people get tense and they stop breathing and they start to push out these longer sentences without any oxygen, causing them to speed up, and then their voice trails off because they have no oxygen. Every time I pause, I'm getting a little inhale. Okay, so it must be impartial. So what if I had my flip chart, if we were back at my condo, the first page is blank, but then I flip that page over and the top of the page, it says proper. And then I put a number 1 and I write impartial in capital letters, taking up the whole space. And then I put a number 2. And I'm spacing these out so they'll take up the whole page. Doctor, by impartial, what we mean is that you're not an advocate for either side.
Correct. I just call it as I see it.
Doctor, you're trained that a proper medical evaluation must not only be impartial. Now I turn and I look at it and use my hand to draw the attention of the audience to it. But it must also be objective.
Correct.
Now I write down objective and then I put a number 3. Doctor, by objective, what we mean is that you don't cherry pick the evidence to support a desired opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't cherry pick the evidence, but I do point out the important evidence of what is the foundation of my opinion.
Doctor, you're trained that a proper medical evaluation must not only be impartial and objective, but it must also be complete.
Correct.
So
To
now
the
I
best
write
of
down.
our ability.
Now I write down complete, and I say, Doctor, by complete, what we mean is that you consider all relevant information.
I consider all the relevant information available to me at that time.
All right, so that's chunk 2, the right way. And I don't really care what my expert says. Like he's, every time he editorializes, he's just being defensive, right? That was available to me at that time, right? Instead of yes.
Yeah.
And in your entire career, how many defense experts have you ever come across that were impartial, objective, and complete based upon our definitions?
0.
0, right? But you're
Right.
getting them to agree. And they can't disagree with it or they'll look ridiculous. And so
Right.
as they agree, their cortisol is rising, because when you have this shit written down before you flip the page, it's like, look, this is a prepared piece. This is not off the cuff. This has been rehearsed, and this train is on the tracks and it's going exactly to the station where it's supposed to, right?
Right.
So now we go to the next part. Doctor, the opposite of a proper medical evaluation, one that's impartial, objective, and complete, well, that would be a biased evaluation.
Correct, which I would never do.
So now I flip the sheet over, and of course it says biased at the top, right? So now, again, Doctor, you're trained and you know that there are certain risks associated with a paid expert's choice to conduct a biased medical evaluation.
Yeah, but you have safeguards to prevent any issues from having money influence you.
Well, one of those risks is that the jury could be misinformed about the patient's condition.
Correct.
So now I turned and looked and I said the jury could be misinformed, like warning, warning. And so then I write number 1, misinformed, and then I put number 2. Doctor, you're trained and you know. So this is an example of stepping. You're not just trained, but you also know it. You're trained and you know that if a paid expert chooses, now I've just called you a paid expert for the 3rd time, and it's a choice, it's not accidental, it's intentional, to conduct a biased medical evaluation, not only could the jury be misinformed about the patient's condition, but they could also be misled as to the extent of the patient's injuries.
Correct.
So then I write misled, number 2, and I got number 3. Of course, we got 3s, the trilogies. And, being misled is worse than being misinformed. So that's another example of stepping. Doctor, you're trained and you know that if a paid expert chooses to conduct a biased medical evaluation, not only could the jury be misinformed about the patient's condition and misled as to the extent of the patient's injuries, but perhaps worst of all, they could be deceived into undervaluing the human harms and suffering that were caused.
Yeah.
So then I write deceived. So I got misinformed, misled, and deceived. Obviously, it's harder for the jury to believe that a doctor will deceive them. But if he's willing to misinform and mislead them, then he's probably more likely to deceive them. So then we get to the conclusion. So this next question is called a refocusing move, where it's like squirrel. Or this is, so doctor, let me ask you this question. Or here's my question. Because the idea is this is signals to the jury. This is why I asked the 20 previous questions to get the concession to this point. On December 14th, 2022, you had a choice to make. So tell us all, what did you choose to do? Now, any expert with his salt is going to be like, huh? What do you mean? Because it's an intentionally ambiguous question. Nobody's just going to guess. So just ask me, what do I mean?
Okay, what do you mean?
What I mean is that's called spontaneous loop. You take their bullshit nonsense and you give it back to them. So that way it's just using their own words against them, right? What I mean is, did you choose to conduct a proper medical evaluation? One that was, now I flipped a sheet out because it flipped back. That was impartial, objective, and complete, like you were trained to do. Or did you choose to violate your training and conduct a biased evaluation? Then I flip the page back over and I look at it, knowing all the risks.
I chose to do a impartial.
Of course you did. So come up and put your initials on here. But see, this is like a great starting one. Actually, Panish uses it in all his depots now, which I'm very proud of. Thank you very much. Because it's such a setup. It's a total setup for the guy because they can't answer it other way. They know that they're lying sacks of shit. And by doing this cross like that, you draw a line in the sand. Like, you call this guy a lying sack of shit, and the jury's leaning in now. And like Roger Dodd says, a dog ain't interested in a fish that don't flop. You have to create the tension, the friction in the courtroom to keep the jury interested. They want to see a fight. And hopefully, this is cross. So they've already seen you in your whole case. So hopefully they're cheering for you at this time as you are their hero. And you're going to pummel this lying defense expert. So this will be a good start to pummeling it. And people are like, what if I don't have any impeachments? I'm like, then you probably don't want to do this cross. If you don't have any and it's like, no, this just make you look bad because you're like promising them that you're going to slaughter the guy and you do nothing.
Yeah, you can't have it fizzle.
Yeah, you can't have it fizzle. You got to have it pop.
You better have something there.
Pop. All right, just like TLU Huntington Beach is going to pop, pop, pop. It's going to be great. All right, Burg, it's been great. Good hanging out and chatting here. You've had an interesting, challenging life. See, people look at your life and say, "Oh, he's got such a great life. He's 44, got the big firm he's part of, got a nice, easy start, little glide into with the big dad trial lawyer. It helps to have a good start. Trust me. Like, my dad was a lawyer. Everybody knew him in town, and he was just a country lawyer. He wasn't a big personal injury lawyer. So it made, it distracted me till I was 45 years old, doing criminal defense and stuff back in Michigan, but still, it's a good start, Burg. So I'll see you and your dad and your cousin and Jessica at Huntington Beach and whoever else is coming with you in about 43 days. So make sure that you keep honing your stuff and telling everybody you know, because if they don't show up here, they're gonna miss the greatest fucking conference of 2020, not of 2025, probably ever. Because last year Huntington Beach was the best ever. Some people like Vegas better, most don't. People ask anybody, they're like, honestly, I like Huntington Beach better. I'm like, I like Huntington Beach better. It's so much better to be at the beach than, in a casino with recycled air. That's like an entire, you know what I mean? And having the whole hotel. That's one of the things that sucked about Vegas. You had to walk a half a mile through Caesar's Palace to get to the venue. So.
Well, we're excited. Can't wait. And I know it's going to be so many amazing speakers and so much information. And like your events are always different. I mean, the TLU
New York
was like, everybody knew each other by the end, which I've never had happen at a conference. I mean, it was such a community. It was wonderful.
Dude, it is like, hopefully you got, because I have everybody do a personal bio. So you basically know people's backstories, which is like, it's so great because people put whatever they want to share about themselves, they put in their personal bio, but I think it really helps get people connected. And then, people do the workshops. I send out, the workshop instructor have to have 2 Zoom meetups with their class ahead of time, but we send out the personal bios to all the people in the small groups, right? So that way you get to learn about the people in your small group, you meet them ahead of time. Well, when you get to meet them, when you meet them in person, you already know them a little bit, right? So it creates a much greater level of comfort, especially you do 2, 3, 4 workshops. Some people do like 8 workshops, which is, great for them because they're doing it in these small groups the whole time. And they talk to people like, all I want to do is workshops. I don't like lectures. I'm like, I'm with you, man. If I could just do a conference with just workshops and it could be financially feasible, I'd do it. But it's not, you know what I mean? Yeah. And plus most people just want to do lectures. And like, even though I think workshops are better, I'm not the customer. Got to keep the customers happy here. I'm a customer-focused business here, so
you please the people.
Got to please the people, man. That's what people are like. Why do you do Vegas? I'm like, I don't like it, but my customers, they want to go to Vegas and hang out and gamble and drink. I can't control people. This is still hopefully a free country where we might be sliding in the wrong direction, but hopefully we're going to reverse that slide, be part of the resistance, and keep democracy strong for us all.
Yeah,
that's the goal.
You gotta please the audience, give them what they want. But the same is true for jurors. Like when you're in trial, you better figure out how to get the jury the information. This little piece over here, and all my trials, Dan, I try to come up with something that entertains me. And I'm like, if I'm entertained during the trial, hopefully the jury is too. So like for this case, our client, she got shocked. She had an electric shock. And ultimately, it had kind of like a traumatic brain injury symptoms. And the defense's whole theory of the case was that she didn't have any burns on her hands. Therefore, she wasn't shocked. So we used a little connection here. This little thing right there is a sponge. And so we are showing the jury and teaching the jury with the first witness that a dry sponge doesn't light the light bulb. A wet sponge, which is what our client's hands were wet, allows less resistance and the energy to move. And so it lights up the light bulb. And then so after it's lighting up the light bulb, we're asking the expert to explain, why is it not burning the sponge? And so with the first witness of the case, we essentially took out the defense's whole theory of defending the case with this fun little experiment that we had.
What is that thing?
It's an electrical circuit that we plugged in, and then it wouldn't light up the light bulb on the bottom. And then we wet the sponge, and then it lights up. And we had our expert explaining it. And basically, by the time we were done with that, we had won the case.
That's good creativity, Burg.
It was a lot of fun. But you got to come up with fun stuff. That's
why don't you bring that to TLU with you so you can entertain the people?
It's actually really dangerous. I've had a couple of people that are like, throw that thing away. Like we had an expert with the gloves and the big boots on, and we made it dramatic. And the judge was like, "Don't burn down my courtroom." So.
All right. Sounds good, Burg. We'll see you soon. 41 days or so. All right.
All right. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it. Take care.
Ready to train with the Titans and set records with your verdicts? Register for our live conferences and boot camps at triallawyersuniversity.com. Start getting your reps in before the big event by going to tluondemand.com to gain instant access to live lectures, case analysis, and skills training videos from the trial lawyer champions you love and respect, as well as pleadings, transcripts, PowerPoints, and notes for a roadmap to victory. Join the group that continues to get extraordinary results. Trial Lawyers University, produced and powered by LawPods.